We chose to explore Istedgade Street, which is known for exuding diversity with an abundance of sex shops, strip bars, hair salons, boutiques, and restaurants. Right outside of Copenhagen Central Station, an interesting blend of commercial businesses and residential communities coexist.
During our time, we stopped in all sorts of shops and stores. It was a great way to meet local Danish residents and hold a better understanding of the neighborhood. We stopped in a local children's store. We noticed that although the store held a lot of great gender-neutral toys, there was also a very prominent blue and pink color scheme that accentuated gender norms. From this interaction in the children's store, it is clear that even local shops accentuate societal gender views.
While wandering down Istedgade, we noticed a hip beer bar with an interesting and inclusive logo. The shop also featured multiple abstract paintings of both women and men drinking beer. We wanted to talk to the shop owner to discuss his experience with the gender inclusivity within the beer industry. Here's what he had to say.
So the first question is who's the main clientele?
Yeah, mainly in the shop, a mixture actually. Yeah, because actually I was about to jump straight to statistics, because I can see from my Instagram. It's funny, if you look at that, you get like a profile of gender. Then it's like a quarter women and like the rest men, pretty much throughout. But yeah, in the shop, I'd say pretty mixed really, but leaning a bit more towards like male clientele.
Do you try to gear any of your beers to attract women? Just since like beer is typically seen as a more masculine drink?
Yes and no. So we kind of want to do it in a way that's going against the can I have a girly drink, or like that's like I don't want that, or the worst end, like, oh, that's a bit gay. You hear these things quite often, and we try and flip it around a little bit. It's difficult because you don't want to argue with every single customer, because you do hear it quite a lot. But then it's nice to say like, oh, what do you mean by a girly drink? If a bloke says it, or, if a woman says it, like, well, what does that mean? Because, we don't want to do like lady drink, like here's this like soft pink, like lovely cider just for women. So that definitely we don't want to do. But
what's it like having a shop in this neighborhood? Like, we're trying to learn more about the neighborhood.
Yeah. So it's a traditionally like working class neighborhood. Okay. Like you had the meatpacking district, so this was sort of where people lived who worked predominantly in the meatpacking. So it was like working class, but then it's gentrified sort of fairly long time ago, really. It's always a process, so it's still kind of gentrifying. But it was one of the first neighborhoods to become quite hip because it's very close to the center, it's close to the station. It used to be a lot kind of nightlifey because this was sort of like kind of a sex area, sort of. So you had kind of sex workers and then sex shops and stuff as well, because Denmark was quite liberal with pornography very early in like European terms. So it got a bit of a destination of like a little bit of Amsterdam effect. So at one point it was a bit of a like place you go for like, like fun weekend and go and see like interesting stuff. But that's kind of died out. So it's funny, you see changes within the neighborhood. So now it's like a family neighborhood and it's already quite trendy, and you don't have lots of like, so many of the traditional people living here. But then, that's it. We're the social beer shop, so we're trying to sort of like be open to that and what the neighborhood, the people who are already in the neighborhood, and what the new people, and how does that go together. So we work with the Social Free Court, which is like an organization that hires or allows me to hire people who are sort of maybe in fragile situations, and they're sort of predominantly local people, like maybe drug users or whatever, and then we can pay them cash in hand, and that's a sort of nice way of using people who are really on the edge of the neighborhood. You see like the women's shelter, Men's Yem, which is like the homeless shelter, and also the sort of mental health local unit. So so that's a good thing if you want to look at like what the neighborhood.
That's very cool. Yeah, we will definitely take that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As we walked down Istedgade, we saw several hair salons and barbers. What was interesting, however, is we passed by many hair extension parlors, which seemed to be geared towards women of color.
We interviewed an employee at Plan E Sex Shop. They asked not to be recorded, so we'll just give an overview of their responses. They said that the clientele of the shop is basically everyone over 18, including single people and young couples. The majority of people are couples, but they come into the shop separately. They explained that most customers are pretty open to asking for suggestions on products. While looking outside the shop, a group of young kids walked by. We asked the employee about their relationship with the neighbors. They said they have a good relationship with the families of the neighborhood. The families just asked that full nude images not be displayed on the windows of the shop. We then asked a bit about the products of the store. The employee said most of the products were geared towards women and that none of the products were specifically for queer sex.
Meat and masculinity often go hand in hand. In most societies, men are expected to consume large amounts of meat, and women are expected to eat more vegetables and smaller amounts of food. Additionally, oftentimes, butcher shops are seen as a place where a man belongs. Therefore, we found it interesting that directly next to portraits of nude women in sex shops were lots of different butcher shops.
We also noticed that the sidewalk did not have curb cuts, but rather the whole sidewalk was flat, making it accessible for people who use wheelchairs. This is not surprising, considering Istedgade is seen as a somewhat progressive area.
In conclusion, Istedgade is a hip and trendy area of Copenhagen, whose working class roots are still very visible. Through schools and sex shops, boutiques and butchers, this neighborhood simultaneously enforces and breaks down sex and gender norms.